Hey everyone, welcome back. In the last video, we learned how to select elements in the DOM using methods like getElementById, query selector, and explored the differences between HTML collections, node lists, and arrays. Now that we know how to find elements, let's learn how to change them. In this video, I'll show you how to change text and HTML content, modify attributes, and update CSS styles dynamically. I'll also clarify the differences between properties and methods and explain some key details that often trip up beginners, like when HTML gets rendered and when it doesn't. Let's get started. Let's start with this simple HTML. We have a first heading within the body that says welcome to the site, and welcome is wrapped with strong tags. Then we have a script tag, script tags that is linked to some JavaScript in a separate page. And within the JavaScript, we are grabbing the title here by the ID. So the ID is title, and so we're using getElementById. It's a method, and we are capturing that ID to then put that element really and store it into the variable of title. Now, what we're going to want to do is change the text, and we're going to use .textContent to do that. And we're saying essentially, well, now let's switch it to hello JavaScript and then use strong tags to wrap around hello. And what we're seeing here instead is, if we, show first what it looks like, we have welcome to the site in the browser. And then when we go ahead and add the text content, JavaScript is changing this to hello JavaScript, but you see that the strong tags are still showing. And in order to resolve that, you're going to want to use actually innerHTML, because text content just strictly pulls text. So it's not recognizing welcome to the site with the strong tags. It just totally drops that. It's just pulling the text. And so it's not possible to try to do like use strong tags again all over. And so we're doing instead title.innerHTML, and you'll see that now we have hello JavaScript with those strong tags intact. And we actually can see that if we go ahead and come to the dev tools, we can go ahead and see that we have the header with a strong tags wrapped around hello and JavaScript. So you can see that's working correctly, but it doesn't work for title or for text content. So what's happening is we talked about the strong tag is not rendered, and it literally displays the text strong with the greater than sign and less than sign. And that's because text content is a property that sets or gets plain text, and it treats everything as literal characters, not HTML. So that's something to keep in mind between text content and innerHTML when changing items on a page. And any existing HTML inside the element is replaced and not interpreted. And that's what we are experiencing with text content. Strong doesn't carry over. Now, what we can do, what we did was with, innerHTML, we did, it's able to parse HTML or parse the string, and it actually creates DOM elements and inserts them. One thing to keep note of with innerHTML is to be careful with it when inserting content such as coming from a user, like a form input or comment, because it's a major security risk. And this is how cross-site scripting attacks can happen. Essentially, someone can inject some code, submit the form, and it can modify the website. So there's a huge security risk there to just keep in mind with using innerHTML for something where it has user input. Now, if you are using user-generated content, be sure to use .textContent, as long as you're aware of the limitations of it, since it just pulls directly just text. Or you can also sanitize the input properly in other forms. Now, we have some other examples I want to go through, and one of those is going to be this image here. We have, sandbox 2 we can hop into, and essentially what's happening is we have an image. Hop right over. It's not displaying because this is just a demo just to show you, because we're going to be dealing with alt text, so I want you to be able to see it. So we have updated hero image, and let's actually refresh here. Let's go ahead and temporarily remove this script tag so we can see it. So we have hero image. We have an image with an ID of hero with a source of default.jpg, which is just, it doesn't exist. It's an image that doesn't exist. And then we have the alt text of hero image, and we can see that in the browser, hero image. Now we are modifying this with JavaScript since that's what we're talking about today. And when we add this script here, we're linking to this sheet here. And what's happening is we are using get element by ID like we did before to capture that element with the ID of hero, storing in a variable. And then what we're doing is we're using the setAttribute method to modify those attributes. So you can use methods like getAttribute and setAttribute that essentially are methods that perform actions. And so that's what's happening here. We're saying for at least for setAttribute, we're grabbing, what attribute? It's the source. We want to change it to updated.jpg. And then we're grabbing alt attribute and updating that to updated hero image. And we are seeing that directly here. And we can see that also in the console. We can see this here. We can see this in the dev tools. We see that we have now the source of updated.jpg and the alt text of updated hero image. And that's what we're seeing as well in the browser. And so that is a method you can use to modify. You can also, the other one I mentioned was getAttribute, and that gets the value of an attribute. And setAttribute is, sets an attribute. It changes it. So if you just want to grab something, you can use getAttribute to do that. Now, you also, an alternative to get the same result is you can access the attribute directly. And so that's what we're doing here in this example. And you'll see that it's another description that's been changed. Source has been also changed to updated.jpg. And this is also, this is accessing a property instead. So we used a method above. Now we're using a property. And this is just, properties that map to the common attributes like source and alt that you would use for an image. And so that's what we're updating. And so you can, take from this that, methods are when you want to perform an action on an element, and properties are details about an element. And so you can use either one to accomplish the same result. There's not always one right answer. Now, some other things, if we hop back into Sandbox 1, I want to discuss. And let's go back over there. Now, you also can do some other cool things like modifying the class of a property. Let's say you want to add some specific styles. And you can do that with .className here. And so what we're doing is we're saying take the element with the ID of title up here and give it a class name of highlight. Now, when you use .className, that replaces all existing classes. So something to keep in mind. And if we actually go to that element, we will see that it has the class of highlight. Fantastic. Now, if you don't want it to remove maybe you had classes on this element and you don't want it to remove everything, a better way to do this is to instead use class list. So you can instead use the below. We have title.classlist.add. You have title.classlist.remove and title.classlist.toggle. So it's accounting for all the other classes you might have. And we're, in this case, adding a new class of highlight. We are removing a class of hidden if it exists. In this case, it doesn't. It's just for the example. And then we are having also .toggle. And .toggle is essentially, if the element doesn't have the class of active, then it will add it to, if the element doesn't have the class of active, it's going to add it to the element. And if it does have it, it's going to remove it. So it's great for toggling on and off things, which we'll get to a later example with light and dark mode. That's a perfect example to use toggle. And we will see with these examples, we will take a look at this. We have highlight, so that's been added. We also have active. So active wasn't there before. Now it is because it wasn't there. And so that's the power of toggle. So these are some other options, and this is great for if you don't want to eliminate every single class you've maybe applied using, HTML and CSS. Now, one other thing I'll mention is you can also apply styles directly using .style. And here's what we're doing here. Essentially, this is going to apply an inline style to your element. So something to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is we're using camel case. So background color, for instance, no longer is background dash color like you would see in CSS. It's background with a capital C for color. and that's what we're using. So whenever you have those dashes, just replace it for, instead of dash color, that doesn't work. So always just replace it for camel case. And so that's what's happening here. It's going to apply inline directly to the HTML element and override styles from your style sheet if you had an external sheet. And you'll see that has applied. We've got a background color. We've modified the text color, and we've modified the font size as well to 2rem. For most styling, I would mention that it's better to just use classes, such as using class list, and it keeps, your JavaScript and CSS a bit separate. So that would be a bit, more ideal than applying styles within your JavaScript sheet that you're working with. Now, with all this said, I have one final example I want to go through that will really kind of bring this all home. So we have in Sandbox 3, we have a button and some text, and let's take a look at the HTML first. So we have a button with an ID of toggle button, and it says toggle theme, and you can see that here. Then we have a box or a div with an ID of box, and we've applied the class of light to it. And we are saying that, this is a box with just some text. And then we have a link to the external JavaScript sheet that we're working with, Sandbox 3. And so first, let's go into, before we get to the JavaScript, let's go into the CSS. All we're doing here is applying the styles that we want to use. So we want to work with light and dark mode. And we're saying, by default, we have light mode already activated, class of light. And it's going to be background of white, color of black. And then we want to be able to toggle and add essentially the dark mode, which is going to be background black and color of white. So we're flipping it. And so we see that, by default, it's the white background and the text color is black. And then let's dive into the JavaScript really quick. So what's happening here? So we have the button. We're capturing the button with its ID. Super straightforward. We're capturing the box because we want to work with the box. And then we want to add an event listener to the button that on click, when we click on the button, it's going to change. We're using class list.toggle to change it to dark. And we will see that when we click on the button, it switches to black. And so that's that light mode and dark mode. Now, one thing I want to mention is we are not removing, when we click on the button, we are not removing light mode. Light mode is still there, or the class is still there. We're just adding the dark class. And you can see that here in the HTML, in the dev tools here. We have class, and you'll see that it's light and dark. And if we toggle this off, light stays, but dark is removed. And so that's what that toggle is. It's really toggling. If dark is there, you add it. If it's not, you remove it. It has nothing to do with the light mode. Even though we are toggling between light and dark, visually, we aren't actually, removing the light class at all. And the reason that works is because CSS is read from top down. So we have the light mode, and then we add the dark mode. And so because the dark mode is after light mode, and when it's added, it's just going to override light mode. And so that's how we're actually getting this to work in the browser. And so that's it. Now, to really quickly recap what we've just discussed, there's a couple of things I want you to keep in mind when, modifying elements. So to recap, if you want to update some text in the browser, like so, if you want to update some text, you can use textContent. Just remember that it's not capturing any elements. It's strictly just the plain text. If you want to capture some elements, use HTML content, which is .innerHTML. So that's updating text. Now, if you want to update attributes, you can use getAttribute and setAttribute. Those are methods, and they can modify attributes from an element. And we learned that in this other example with the image. You also can access the attribute directly, those properties of an element, such as .source and .alt. And so that's all we're doing here, accessing .source and .alt, like so. And then finally, if you want to apply CSS, if you want to update CSS, you can use classes. And so you can use .className. Just remember, it overrides all of the classes that were previously there. or use .ClassList. And .ClassList comes with multiple options that we have seen. And where is that? That is going to be over here. We've got .ClassList, .add, .remove, and .toggle. Those are all ways to update the list of classes for one particular element. And then you can also use the property, access the property directly by using .style and then .color, .font size, .background color, any of those, properties you want to access directly, you can do that. And that's how you change content, attributes, and styles in the DOM using JavaScript. We covered the differences between textContent and innerHTML, how to safely insert content, and how to make style and class changes interactively. In the next video, we'll learn how to create and remove elements dynamically. If this video helped, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more beginner-friendly JavaScript tutorials. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.